All right, so today we're going to be looking at something that you might think you've already mastered.
Oh.
Formal versus informal English.
Yeah.
You're probably already pretty good at it, right?
Most people are, yeah.
But we are going to go beyond just good.
Okay.
We're going for masterful.
I like it.
We're unlocking a secret code today
A secret code.
to help you tailor your communication
Okay.
to make the maximum impact possible.
Right.
Whether you're trying to, be super credible in the boardroom
Right.
or just bond better with your friends.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? It's not just about knowing the rules, but it's about understanding the why behind them.
The why.
Yeah, like why does a certain word choice make us feel a certain way? How do these subtle shifts in language, really impact our perceptions and interactions?
Yeah, and we're basing this deep dive on a podcast called Fluent Conversations.
Okay.
And one of the things that really surprised me was how easy it is to sabotage yourself by using the wrong level of formality.
Oh, interesting.
Like, imagine you're at a networking event.
Okay.
And you're trying to, project this air of confidence and professionalism.
Yeah.
But instead of saying something like, "Excuse me, would you mind if I joined your conversation?"
Whoa.
You blurt out, "Yo, can I hang with you guys?"
Oof, yeah, that's cringeworthy.
Right.
Yeah, it really highlights how these small choices we make can have a big impact on how we're perceived.
Totally.
It's not just about grammar. It's about social intelligence.
Ooh, I like that.
Understanding the unspoken rules of communication
Yeah.
and using them to your advantage.
Yeah, the podcast had this great example that really stuck with me.
Okay.
They compared the phrases, "I'm afraid I must decline your offer," to "Sorry, but I'll have to say no."
Yeah.
And it just made me realize that even when the message is the same, the feeling is totally different.
Absolutely. The first one feels very stiff and distant, almost like you're putting up a wall.
Right.
The second one is much warmer, more human,
Yeah.
even though it's still saying no.
Yeah.
It shows you can be direct, but you don't have to be harsh.
So how do we break down this code of formality?
Well,
Fluent Conversations identified 3 key elements.
okay.
And the first one is vocabulary.
Vocabulary, I think about it this way. Every word carries a certain weight, a certain formality level.
Okay.
For instance, require versus need, inquire versus ask.
Yeah.
Even something simple like assist versus help.
Oh, interesting.
These little swaps can instantly elevate your language or make it more approachable.
Okay, so it's not just about using fancy words.
Right.
It's about understanding which words fit the situation.
Exactly. It's about matching your vocabulary to the context and to the person that you're speaking with. And it goes beyond individual words.
Okay.
Sentence structure plays a big role as well.
Sentence structure.
Yeah, the formal language tends towards longer, more complex sentences,
Okay.
often using the passive voice.
Like the report was submitted by the deadline.
Yes.
Instead of I sent in the report on time.
That's a great example. The first one feels detached and objective, right?
Yeah.
More appropriate maybe for formal reports or academic writing.
Yeah.
Informal language, though, it embraces contractions and phrasal verbs. It has a more relaxed conversational flow.
Yeah.
It's about creating that sense of connection, immediacy.
And of course, we can't forget about punctuation and greetings.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, "Dear Mr. Johnson" versus "Hey, Alex" is a pretty clear distinction.
Right.
But what about the subtle stuff?
That's where it gets interesting. Even something as simple as how you sign off an email.
Oh.
Sincerely versus best
Yeah.
can convey a lot about your relationship with the recipient
Right.
and the tone of the message. It's like the finishing touch that sets the seal on the whole communication.
So how do we put all this knowledge into practice?
Well,
It's one thing to understand the theory, but
Yeah.
how do we actually use it in different situations?
right. Well, that's where context comes in. Fluent Conversations did a good job at breaking it down,
Okay.
by looking at specific situations.
Okay.
Like emails or meetings or even casual chats.
That's super helpful. So let's start with emails. I feel like those can be tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to sound professional, but not like stiff,
Where emails often straddle that line between formal and informal.
Right.
You're not writing a legal document.
Yeah.
But you're also not texting your best friend.
Yeah.
So the podcast really emphasized, polite greetings,
Okay.
maintaining a professional tone throughout, and avoiding slang or like overly casual abbreviations.
So no, "Hey, dude, what's up?" It's my boss.
Probably a good idea to avoid that, yeah.
Okay, good rule of thumb. What about meetings and presentations?
Yeah.
Those feel like they're more on the formal end of the spectrum.
They often are, yeah, especially in professional settings.
Yeah.
The podcast really highlighted the importance of using transitional words and phrases
Okay.
to guide the listener through your ideas.
Okay.
Things like, furthermore, in addition, on the other hand, These little words can make your presentation sound much more structured and polished.
It's like you're building a case, almost.
Exactly.
Leading them to your conclusion.
Right. And, those polite phrases we talked about earlier, like, could we possibly discuss, or I'd like to propose, those become even more important in these kind of settings.
Right.
Shows respect for everybody's time and input.
Okay, so we've covered emails and meetings. What about more casual interactions?
Sure.
Like friendly chats or texts?
Yeah, that's where you can loosen up a bit,
Okay.
Contractions, phrasal verbs, even emojis are all fair game.
Right.
Depending on your relationship with the person.
But how do you make sure that you're not crossing the line?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I once accidentally called my professor dude in an email.
Oh, no.
Oh, I wanted to die.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I think the key is just being really mindful of your audience and the overall context.
Context.
Yeah. It's like choosing the right outfit, right?
Okay.
You wouldn't wear a ball gown to a backyard barbecue.
Right.
And you wouldn't show up to a job interview in sweatpants.
That's a great analogy.
So it's all about matching your communication style to the situation.
But Fluent Conversations also warn about some common pitfalls.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That we can fall into even when we're trying to be careful.
Right. One of the biggest ones is overusing fancy words.
Oh, yeah.
It's tempting to try and sound impressive.
Oh, totally.
But sometimes a simple word is way more effective than a complex one.
Right.
Clarity should always be the goal.
It's like, don't use a $5 word when a 50-cent word will do.
Exactly. Another common pitfall is mixing formal and informal language at the wrong time.
Right.
It creates this jarring effect, like hearing a classical pianist suddenly break into a rap song.
Oh, I'm cringing just thinking about it.
And, the podcast also mentioned cultural differences.
Oh, right.
Which is something I hadn't really considered before.
Yeah.
That's a crucial element,
Yeah.
What's considered polite and respectful in one culture could be seen as overly formal.
Right.
Or even rude in another.
Wow.
For example, in some cultures, it's totally normal to address people by their first names, even in a professional setting.
Yeah.
But in other cultures, using titles and last names is essential even when you know the person well.
So it's not just about knowing the rules of English.
Right.
It's about understanding the cultural context as well.
It does. It adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Totally.
But it also makes communication so much more interesting.
Right.
It's about bridging those cultural gaps and finding ways to connect authentically.
I like that perspective. So we've talked about the pitfalls. What are some strategies for avoiding them? Is it just practice? Practice.
Absolutely. Practice is key.
Okay.
Fluent Conversations had some great suggestions like rereading emails before you send them.
Okay.
Getting feedback from like a trusted colleague or friend.
Yeah.
And even role-playing different situations.
Okay.
To get comfortable with both formal and informal styles.
I remember they also suggested that role play exercise.
Oh, yeah?
Where you write a formal email and then an informal text message about the same topic.
Yes.
Have you tried that one yet?
Oh, yeah.
It was
How'd it go?
It was challenging, but it was really eye-opening.
Interesting. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I decided to use the scenario of asking for a deadline extension.
Okay, classic.
Yeah, right. So for the formal email to my professor, I channeled everything we talked about.
Okay, let me guess. Polite greetings, clear explanation, respectful tone.
Exactly, yeah. It felt like I was stepping into a different persona.
It's interesting how language can do that, right? Like we can embody different roles just by changing the way we speak.
Yeah, and then writing the informal text to a friend about running late because of that same deadline. It was like switching from a waltz to a hip-hop dance.
I bet what stood out to you the most, writing in those two contrasting styles.
It made me realize just how much we adjust our language without even thinking about it,
Yeah, it's subconscious.
Right, but being conscious of those choices.
Right.
Gives you this whole new level of control.
Yeah, that awareness is what makes a good communicator a great communicator.
Yeah, Fluent Conversations also mentioned how formal versus informal language has evolved over time.
Oh, that's a fascinating topic.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy how language is like this living, breathing thing.
It is.
Constantly changing.
Yeah, the Nutcast talked about how centuries ago, formal language was so much more elaborate and ornate.
Right. Makes you appreciate how simple things are now.
Well, simpler, maybe, but also more nuanced.
That's true.
Think about all the changes we've seen with technology and the internet and mass media.
Right.
They've all had such a profound impact on the way we communicate.
Yeah.
Like the lines between formal and informal are constantly being blurred.
Totally. Like emojis and internet slang and abbreviations have become a part of everyday language.
It really makes you wonder what future historians will make of it all.
I know. It's kind of wild to think about.
Yeah, it shows how language is this reflection of our culture and values. What we see as acceptable now might have been unthinkable a few decades ago.
So how do we make sure we're communicating effectively in this constantly evolving landscape?
That's the question, isn't it? It feels like the rules are always changing.
Right.
I don't know if the rules are changing, but I think they're definitely expanding.
Okay. Yeah.
The key is to just stay curious and adaptable.
Okay.
Pay attention to how language is used in different situations.
Yeah.
Whether it's a news article or a social media post. Notice the nuances, the subtle shifts in tone and vocabulary.
So it's like we're all lifelong students of language.
We are.
Always observing and learning.
Exactly. And, fluid conversations reminded us that it's not about being right or wrong.
Right.
It's about using language as a tool to connect with others.
That's a good point. This whole deep dive has just been a great reminder that even something as familiar as language can still have hidden depths and complexities. And by being more mindful of our choices, we can all become more effective communicators. So we can build stronger relationships and just navigate the world with more confidence,
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up.
I think so, too.
So listeners, remember, language is power.
It is.
Wield it wisely and watch your world expand.
All right, so are you ready to boost your English fluency?
Yeah, always.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into idioms and phrasal verbs, going way beyond the basics.
Yeah, even advanced learners can trip up on these.
They can be tricky.
They really can.
But think about it like this. You've got the grammar down pat, you've got a solid vocabulary, but now you really want to sound natural like a native speaker.
Right.
That's where these idioms and phrasal verbs really come into play. They're like those secret ingredients that just add so much flavor.
And you know what? We've got a fantastic selection for you today, pulled from a 3-hour workshop. We've condensed it down to like the juiciest, most essential parts.
Yeah, we're going to break down these expressions, look at all those little subtle nuances, and by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand them, but you'll be able to use them confidently.
Yeah, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
To actually use them.
Exactly.
All right.
So let's jump right in with an idiom that's all about approaching information with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay.
Take it with a grain of salt.
I love that one.
It's so good, right? So let's say you've got a colleague who's known for embellishing stories just a little bit. You might say something like, he tends to exaggerate, so take his stories with a grain of salt.
It's a really nice way to express caution, without like directly accusing somebody of, figging.
Right.
You're basically saying, yeah, I'm listening, but I'm also keeping in mind that this might not be the whole truth.
And it's so important, I think, especially these days where we're just bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah, we have to be really careful about what we believe.
Right.
Take it with a grain of salt. It's like a little reminder to pause, think critically before we just accept anything as like the absolute truth.
That's so important. So let's shift gears a little bit to a more lighthearted idiom, spill the beans.
Oh, I love this one.
This is when someone reveals a secret.
Yeah.
Often unintentionally, like that classic surprise party scenario.
Yeah, somebody let the cat out of the bag.
Right. It's usually used in a playful, kind of teasing way. Not like a serious accusation.
It's like, oh, come on, you can tell me, I won't be mad.
Exactly. I think spill the beans is a perfect example of how idioms can inject humor into language.
Yeah, it's so much more fun than just saying reveal a secret.
Right.
It just adds that little bit of personality.
Okay, so next up we've got an idiom that's all about flexibility. Play it by ear.
Oh, this is a good one.
And this one comes in handy when you're not really sure what the plan is or, things are subject to change.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you're meeting up his friends for dinner, but the restaurant's packed.
Oh, yeah.
What do you say?
Let's just play by ear. We'll see if we can get a table or maybe try somewhere else close by.
Exactly. It's all about being adaptable and going with the flow.
Yeah, that's a really important skill to have.
So important.
Especially when things are, changing all the time.
Right. Playing it by ear lets you adjust those plans and make decisions as you go.
Makes sense.
Okay, so now let's talk about an idiom that's often used when someone's avoiding the main point or being a little evasive beat around the bush.
Oh, I don't like when people do that.
Have you ever noticed how some people just dance around a topic instead of getting straight to the point?
It's frustrating.
It is frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, imagine you're asking a friend about something kind of sensitive.
Right.
But they just keep talking about everything else except what you want to know.
You want to say, just stop beating around the bush.
Right. Tell me what's going on.
What's the deal?
Exactly. It's important, though, to pay attention to the context and the speaker's tone.
Yeah.
Sometimes people beat around the bush because they're uncomfortable or nervous.
Or maybe they're trying to protect someone's feelings.
Right. It's not always about being intentionally evasive.
Right.
Sometimes it's just about finding the right words or approaching a difficult conversation with sensitivity.
That makes sense.
That leads us to an idiom that's all about neutrality, sit on the fence.
Ah, yes.
This one describes someone who's hesitant to choose a side.
They can't make up their mind.
They just can't decide. So picture a heated debate, right? Two people are arguing passionately for these opposed viewpoints.
They're going at it.
But then there's that one person who's just sitting there undecided, carefully weighing those pros and cons.
They're on the fence.
They're sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
And you know what? It can be frustrating if you're looking for a clear commitment.
Yeah, I want to know what side you're on.
Right.
But sometimes, it's good to gather more information before you make a decision.
Right. Sometimes it's a sign of being thoughtful and careful.
Yeah, you want to consider all the angles.
Exactly.
Before you jump in.
Okay, let's move on to an idiom that I think we can all relate to: bite off more than you can chew.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
I know we've all been there, especially when it comes to new challenges or those ambitious goals.
Yeah, it's that feeling of, oh, I can totally do this. And then you realize,
what have I gotten myself in?
I have way too much on my plate.
I remember once trying to learn 3 languages at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Talk about biting off more than I could chew.
Yeah, that's ambitious.
It was fun and challenging, but I quickly realized I needed to scale back.
Yeah, one at a time.
One at a time.
It's easy to get caught up in that initial excitement.
Right.
But we have to be realistic about our time and, what we can actually handle.
Biting off more than you can do can lead to burnout.
And stress.
And you might not even reach your goals.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to start small, build a solid foundation, and then gradually take on more.
One step at a time.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
And speaking of taking shortcuts, let's talk about an idiom that often has a bit of a negative connotation: cut corners.
Uh-oh.
This suggests doing something in a hasty or incomplete way to save time or money, but it can compromise quality.
Yeah, you end up sacrificing something important.
Imagine a construction company trying to finish a project quickly and cheaply.
Right, they might use cheaper materials.
Right.
Or skip some safety checks.
And those consequences could be huge.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that sometimes it's worth investing that extra time and effort to do things properly.
In the long run, it pays off.
Now let's talk about trends. Jump on the bandwagon.
Oh, I see this all the time.
All the time, especially with fashion technology, social media. A new trend pops up and everybody's doing it.
Everyone wants to be part of it.
It's that fear of missing out.
Yeah, that FOMO.
Right. But it's important to remember you don't always have to follow the crowd.
You can make your own choices.
Think critically and do what actually interests you.
Yeah, what aligns with your values.
Exactly. Okay, let's lighten things up again with a playful idiom: pull someone's leg.
Oh, I love this one.
This one's all about teasing in a good-natured way.
Yeah, just a little bit of fun.
Like, I'm just messing with you.
Exactly.
Imagine you're telling a friend this crazy story.
Right, and they believe you.
They totally believe it.
And then you're like, come on, I was just pulling your leg.
It's all about that delivery and the tone.
It's got to be lighthearted.
Right.
Playful.
It's a great way to build rapport.
Yeah, it shows you're comfortable with each other.
Right. But make sure the other person knows you're joking.
Yeah, you don't want to cause a misunderstanding.
And finally, let's wrap up this first round of idioms with burn the candle at both ends.
This is a classic.
This one really captures that feeling of being overworked, stressed out, just exhausted.
Yeah, you're going nonstop.
Think of someone juggling multiple jobs, family responsibilities, and still trying to have a social life.
They're burning the candle at both ends.
It's a reminder that we need to find a balance and take care of ourselves.
We can't do it all.
Right. We need to prioritize well-being.
Yeah, set boundaries.
And find ways to recharge.
And relax.
Okay, so that was our exploration of some amazing idioms. We covered skepticism, humor, flexibility, directness, neutrality, ambition, quality, trends, playfulness, and balance.
That was a lot.
It was a lot.
But we did it.
We did it.
And now, are you ready for phrasal verbs?
Oh, I am so ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's dive into those phrasal verbs. Let's start with hold off, which basically means to postpone or delay something. Like, we're going to hold off on making a decision until we have more information.
Yeah, it's like hitting that pause button.
Exactly. Giving yourself some time to think things through.
Gather more insights, maybe wait for a better moment.
Makes sense, right? Yeah.
It's a good one. All right, so next up, put someone up.
Okay, this one's all about hospitality, offering a place to stay.
Right. Imagine a friend's visiting your city.
You could say, hey, don't even bother with a hotel. I can put you up at my place.
Such a nice gesture.
It is. It's like making someone feel welcome and comfortable.
Exactly. Now let's get a little more nuance with come down to.
Okay, so this is used to highlight the essential element of something.
Right, the core of a situation.
Yeah, like if you're analyzing a problem with lots of different factors,
right,
you might say, ultimately, it all comes down to effective communication.
It's about cutting through the noise and finding what really matters.
Exactly, getting to the heart of the matter.
Okay, so next we got pull through, which conveys this idea of resilience and overcoming challenges.
Yeah, like when someone's going through something really tough.
Right, maybe a serious illness or a personal crisis.
You could say we're all hoping they pull through this.
It's like an expression of hope and support.
Yeah, you're acknowledging the difficulty, but you believe they can overcome it.
It's powerful. Now let's shift gears to a phrasal verb with a much more dramatic meaning, wipe out.
Oh, this one's intense.
Yeah, it usually refers to complete destruction or elimination.
Like think about a natural disaster.
A hurricane or a tsunami.
Yeah, you might say the storm completely wiped out the coastal towns.
It's a strong image. It emphasizes that devastation.
It really does. Okay, so how about a phrasal verb with multiple meanings, break into?
Okay, this one's tricky.
It can be.
Because it can mean a couple of different things.
Right.
So on one hand, it can refer to illegal entry.
Like someone tried to break into my car last night.
Right. But it can also mean entering a new field or profession.
Yeah, like she's trying to break into the music industry.
That's right. So context is super important here.
Yeah, pay attention to those surrounding words.
Figure out what they really mean, right? Set about.
This one implies a determined and purposeful approach to something.
Like when you're starting a new project.
Yeah, you might say, we're setting about to create a more sustainable business model.
It suggests a clear intention and a plan of action.
You're taking charge.
You're making things happen.
And last but not least for this round, step up.
This one often means taking on more responsibility or rising to a challenge.
Yeah, like in a leadership situation.
Imagine someone volunteers to lead a project when no one else will.
You could say he really stepped up and took charge.
It shows initiative and courage.
And a willingness to go above and beyond.
Okay, round 2 of phrasal verbs. Are you ready?
Bring it on.
Let's do it. Bring on.
Perfect example right there.
I know, right?
So bring on often means to cause something to happen, sometimes with negative consequences.
Right. Like stress can bring on headaches.
Lack of sleep can bring on fatigue.
Eating too much sugar can bring on a sugar crash.
It's all about cause and effect.
Right. Recognizing those consequences.
Okay, next up we have track down, which means to find something after a thorough search.
Like when you're looking for something specific.
Yeah, a rare book or a long-lost friend.
You might say, I finally tracked down that old photo album.
It takes effort and persistence.
Right. You don't give up until you find it.
Determination is key. Okay, so now for a phrasal verb that conveys a sense of gradual disappearance. Fade away.
I like this one.
Yeah, it's got a certain feel to it.
Right, like memories can fade away over time.
Enthusiasm can fade away if you don't nurture it.
And that excitement for a year trend can fade away when something new comes along.
Yeah, it's a reminder that things change.
Nothing lasts forever.
All right, so let's move on to map out, which is all about planning and strategizing.
Yeah, when you need a clear plan of action.
Like when you're preparing for a big project.
Or a trip.
You might say, we need to map out our travel route.
It's about creating a roadmap.
Visualizing those steps.
Anticipating those challenges.
Okay, and when it's time to get laser focused, we use zero in on.
Love this one. It's like narrowing down your focus.
Right, honing in on that one crucial aspect.
Like a team trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, they might say, let's zero in on the main cause of the delay.
You're blocking out distraction.
Concentrating all your energy on that one thing.
You ready for a fun one? Screw up.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
This is a casual way of admitting you made a mistake.
And usually a pretty big one.
Like, I totally screw up that presentation.
It's okay to laugh at ourselves sometimes.
Right, we're all human.
We make mistakes.
And last but not least, another multi-meaning phrasal verb, lay off.
Oh, context is key with this one.
It is, because it could mean a couple of different things.
Right.
On one hand, it could mean to terminate someone's employment.
Like the company had to lay off workers due to the recession.
Right. But it can also mean to stop doing something or to ease up.
Like, hey, lay off the junk food.
Or lay off the video games you've been playing all day.
So many possibilities.
So many possibilities. Wow, we covered a lot of ground with those idioms and phrasal verbs.
We did. It's amazing how much they can add to our language.
Right. They give it so much depth and color and personality.
I think what's really interesting is how they reflect our culture.
Yeah. It's like getting a glimpse into how people think and what they value.
And their sense of humor.
So for our listeners out there who want to master English, what are some key takeaways?
Well, first of all, don't be afraid to try them out. The more you use these expressions in real conversations, the more natural they'll become.
Right. It's like practice makes perfect.
Exactly. It's like learning a new dance step. It might feel awkward at first, but the more you do it, the smoother it gets.
I love that analogy. And it reminds me, we can't just passively learn these expressions.
Yeah, you got to use them.
We have to actively integrate them into our language.
And another important thing is to pay attention to context. Idioms and phrasal verbs can have different meanings depending on how they're used.
Right. So you have to consider the surrounding words, the tone of voice, the whole situation.
It's like being a detective.
A language detective.
You got to gather those clues to figure out the real meaning.
So what are some practical steps our listeners can take to really make these expressions stick?
One thing you can do is create your own examples using the idioms and phrasal verbs we talked about.
Okay.
Relate them to your own life, your work, your hobbies.
Make them personal.
Exactly. The more personal the connection, the easier it'll be to remember.
I like that. And what about immersing yourself in authentic English content?
Oh, that's huge. Movies, TV shows, podcasts, books.
It's like surrounding yourself with the language.
And pay attention to how native speakers use these expressions.
It's like getting a free language lesson.
And remember, learning a language takes time.
It's a journey.
There's always something new to discover.
So embrace the challenge, have fun with it, and celebrate your progress.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been a pleasure diving deep into these expressions with you and our listeners today.
And to all our listeners out there, we'd love to hear from you. Which idiom or phrasal verb resonated with you the most? How are you going to use them in your everyday conversations? Share your thoughts, your questions, and your experiences with us on social media. Let's keep this conversation going and keep exploring the amazing world of the English language together.
All right, buckle up, because today we're diving deep into something you specifically requested.
Oh, yeah.
Boosting your vocabulary.
Yes.
For more fluent and confident English.
It's going to be good.
Now, before you panic, we're not expecting you to memorize the entire dictionary.
Not at all. This is about those key words, the kind that can make a real difference in how you express yourself, especially in those situations you mentioned where you want to feel more confident and articulate.
Exactly. And luckily, the source material we're using is super organized with 60 powerful words.
Wow.
Grouped into 6 helpful categories.
I like it.
Though it is kind of funny that the source itself is structured like a podcast episode.
Very meta.
Yeah.
But we'll skip those instructions and jump right into the good stuff.
Okay, let's unpack this first category, expressing opinions.
Okay.
The first word that jumps out at me is concur.
Ooh.
It just sounds so much more decisive than a plain old I agree, you know?
Absolutely. Concur implies you've actually considered the information and come to a thoughtful agreement, which could be especially powerful, say, in a professional setting.
Right.
Where you want to project competence.
Oh, that's a good point. It's not just about using fancy words. It's about choosing the right word to convey the specific message you want.
Exactly. And speaking of conveying messages, the next word, imply, reminds me of something you mentioned. You said you sometimes struggle to give feedback delicately.
Oh, yeah.
Well, imply could be your secret weapon there.
Ooh, tell me more.
So instead of directly criticizing, you can imply your suggestion.
Okay.
For example, instead of saying, that report was too long,
right,
you could say, I wonder if the report's key points could be summarized more concisely.
Oh.
You're implying that it needs to be shorter without directly saying it.
That's brilliant. It softens the criticism while still getting the message across. I can definitely see myself using that.
See, it's all about understanding the nuances of these words and how they can be applied in real-life situations.
Okay, I'm starting to get really excited about this. What else do we have in this category?
Well, we have refute, which is perfect for dismantling a flimsy argument. Politely, of course.
Right.
Remember those meetings where someone proposes an idea that just doesn't hold up?
Oh, I know those meetings all too well.
Refute allows you to disagree respectfully while presenting evidence or logic to back up your stance.
So instead of just saying, I disagree, I could say something like, I understand your point, but I'd like to refute it by presenting these statistics.
Exactly. It shows that you've considered the other perspective, but have a well-reasoned counter-argument. Very effective.
Okay, I'm loving these words already. Now, what about this pair, imply and infer? I always get those mixed up.
Ah, yes, a classic linguistic conundrum. Remember that example we just discussed about implying feedback?
Yes.
Well, if someone inferred from your subtle suggestion that the report needed to be shorter,
right,
that would be on them drawing a conclusion from what you implied.
Okay, so imply is on the speaker's side and infer is on the listener's side. Got it.
You got it. Now, there's another word of this category that I think would be particularly useful for you.
Okay.
Assert. You mentioned wanting to be more vocal in meetings, right?
Oh, yes. Sometimes I feel like I fade into the background a bit.
Well, assert is your power word. Imagine yourself saying, I want to assert that we need to prioritize user experience in this project.
Wow. I can already feel the difference. Assert just has this air of confidence and conviction.
Exactly. It shows that you're not afraid to speak your mind and that you believe in the value of your contributions.
This is fantastic. I'm already feeling more empowered to express my opinions effectively. Okay, what's next on our vocabulary adventure?
Let's move on to personal qualities. This category is all about the words that describe who we are at our core.
Ooh, this sounds intriguing and a little bit introspective, perhaps.
Absolutely. For example, we have meticulous.
Okay.
Which describes someone who pays incredible attention to detail.
Right.
Now, thinking back to your work, I know you take pride in delivering high-quality results. Would you say meticulous is a word that resonates with you?
Definitely. I'm always striving for perfection, whether it's editing a script or organizing an event.
So owning that word and using it to describe your work ethic could really enhance how others perceive your strengths. You could say something like, I'm meticulous in my approach to project management, ensuring that every detail is accounted for.
I love that. It's not just about sounding smart, it's about accurately representing my skills and values.
Precisely. And speaking of values, the next word, resilient, is one that I think we can all relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Life throws curveballs, and it's all about how we bounce back.
Exactly. Resilience isn't about avoiding challenges.
Right.
It's about having the inner strength to overcome them. And remember that setback you told me about how you handled that difficult client situation?
Oh, yeah.
That's a perfect example of your resilience in action.
You know, you're right. I never thought of it that way, but I did manage to navigate that situation effectively and learn from the experience.
Exactly. So when you encounter future challenges, remember that experience and the strength you demonstrated. That's what resilience is all about.
Wow, this is really powerful stuff. I'm starting to see how these words aren't just about expanding my vocabulary, they're about reframing my thinking and recognizing my own strengths.
That's exactly the point. Now, before we move on, I noticed that candid appears in two categories:
Oh.
personal qualities and sophisticated conversations. I wonder what that tells us about the importance of honesty.
That's interesting. Maybe being candid is more valuable than we sometimes realize, both in our personal lives and in those more complex discussions.
It's definitely something to ponder. So before we delve into those sophisticated conversations, let's take a moment to reflect. If you had to choose 3 words from this personal qualities list to describe yourself, which ones would you pick and why?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I would choose meticulous, resilient, and maybe insightful. I feel like those words really capture my approach to work and life in general.
Those are excellent choices. And they highlight the power of owning those qualities and using them to your advantage.
All right, I'm ready to dive into the next category, words for making conversations sound more sophisticated. But I have to admit, I sometimes feel a little silly using big words in casual conversations. Like, will people think I'm trying too hard?
I understand that concern, but think of it this way. These words aren't about showing off.
Right.
They're about expressing yourself more precisely and vividly. It's like having a wider range of colors to paint with.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy. So it's less about sounding smart and more about using the right tool for the job.
Exactly. For instance, the word ubiquitous. Yes, it sounds a bit academic, but it's also incredibly useful for describing something that's everywhere. Like, remember how we were talking about that new social media app everyone's using?
Oh, yeah? The one that's suddenly taken over all my feeds?
Instead of just saying it's everywhere, you could say, that app has become ubiquitous. It just adds a touch of sophistication and precision.
You're right, it elevates the language a bit without sounding pretentious. Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal. What other sophisticated words do we have here?
Well, there's ephemeral,
Okay.
which describes something fleeting or short-lived.
Right.
Now, think about that feeling you describe when a really great book ends, or when you finish a project you've poured your heart into.
Oh, I know that feeling well. A mix of satisfaction and a little bit of sadness that it's over.
Exactly. It's a bittersweet feeling, and ephemeral captures that perfectly. You could say the joy of finishing that project was wonderful, but also somewhat ephemeral.
That's beautiful. I'll definitely be adding ephemeral to my vocabulary arsenal.
And, it doesn't have to be reserved for deep philosophical discussions. You could even use it to describe something as simple as a beautiful sunset.
Oh, that's true. The sunset's colors were vibrant yet ephemeral. I love it.
See, these words can add depth and richness to any conversation, even everyday ones. Now, what about notorious? It's a fun one.
Ooh, yes. It's like that restaurant is notorious for its terrible service, or that politician is notorious for flip-flopping on issues.
Exactly. It conveys a sense of infamy or bad reputation, adding a little bit of spice to your storytelling.
Okay, I'm ready to move on to the next category, words for work and professional settings. I'll be honest, I initially thought I could skip this section since I'm not in a super corporate environment.
That's a common misconception. While these words might be frequently used in offices, understanding them can be valuable in any setting where you're collaborating with others.
You're right. For example, delegation. It's not just about bosses assigning tasks. It's about effectively distributing responsibilities in any group project, even planning a volunteer event or a community initiative.
Exactly. Understanding delegation can help you be a more effective leader even in informal settings. And then there's facilitate, which is such a useful word for anyone who wants to help things run smoothly.
Oh, I love facilitate. It's like I want to facilitate a brainstorming session where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas.
Exactly. It implies a sense of guidance and support, creating an environment where everyone can contribute effectively. Now, I know you mentioned sometimes feeling overwhelmed by group projects. Delegation and facilitate are perfect examples of words that can empower you to take charge and guide those projects towards success.
Wow, that's a really empowering perspective. I'm already feeling more confident about handling those collaborative situations.
And even a word like synergy, which might make you roll your eyes a bit.
Oh, definitely. It's such a buzzword.
It is. But putting aside the corporate jargon, the underlying concept is actually quite valuable. Synergy is about recognizing that the combined effort of a group can be greater than the sum of its individual parts.
Okay, when you put it that way, it does make sense. It's about the power of collaboration and how different skills and perspectives can come together to create something truly amazing.
Exactly. And that's a powerful concept to understand regardless of your work environment.
All right, I'm starting to see the value in these work and professional settings words. They might not be the most glamorous, but they are incredibly useful for clear communication and effective teamwork.
And speaking of clear communication, let's move on to a category that's all about expressing ourselves authentically, emotions and reactions. This is where things get really interesting.
Oh, I love this category. These words are so much more nuanced and evocative than just saying happy or sad.
Exactly. It's like having a whole spectrum of colors to describe the complexities of human emotion. For example, exasperated. It perfectly captures that feeling of utter frustration and annoyance, like when you're dealing with a never-ending queue or a computer that just won't cooperate.
Oh, tell me about it. I felt that way just this morning when I was trying to book a flight online and the website kept crashing.
I can imagine it's much more specific and vivid than just saying annoyed, right?
Absolutely. And then there's elated. It's not just happy. It's a feeling of pure joy and exhilaration, like when you achieve a long-awaited goal or receive wonderful news.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that understanding a wider range of emotion words can actually help us to better regulate our own emotions.
Oh, how so?
When we can accurately label our emotions, we can start to understand the triggers that cause them and develop strategies for coping with challenging situations.
That's so true. If I can pinpoint exactly what I'm feeling, it's easier to figure out how to address the issue or shift my mindset. It's like having a roadmap for my own emotional well-being.
Exactly. It's about becoming more emotionally intelligent, both in understanding ourselves and in empathizing with others.
Okay, this is fascinating. So it's not just about expressing ourselves, it's about understanding the emotions behind the words.
Precisely. And speaking of understanding, how are you feeling right now?
Let me see. I think I'm feeling a mix of intrigued and inspired. This deep dive is really opening my eyes to the power of language.
That's wonderful to hear, and it's a perfect example of how expanding our vocabulary can enhance our self-awareness and emotional intelligence.
All right, I'm excited to explore our final category, words for everyday conversations. These are the words we use all the time, but maybe we could be using them more effectively.
Exactly. It's about refining our everyday language to express ourselves with greater clarity and impact. For example, the word tedious. We all have those tasks or activities that we find boring and repetitive.
Oh, absolutely. Filing paperwork, cleaning the bathroom, waiting on hold. The list goes on.
Exactly. But instead of just saying, ugh, this is so boring, you could say, this paperwork is incredibly tedious. It just adds a touch of eloquence to your complaint.
Huh, I love that. It's like elevating the art of complaining.
Precisely. And then we have substantial.
Okay.
Which is a word you can use to describe something significant or meaningful.
Right.
It could be a substantial meal, a substantial accomplishment, or even a substantial improvement in your communication skills.
Ooh, I like that. It adds a sense of weight and importance.
Exactly. And finally, we have inevitable, which is a great word to use when discussing trends or events that seem certain to happen.
Like, it's inevitable that technology will continue to advance at a rapid pace, or it's inevitable that this cake will be devoured in minutes.
Huh. Both excellent examples.
You know, I'm really impressed with how versatile these everyday conversations words are. They might seem simple at first glance, but they can add so much depth and nuance to our everyday language.
Exactly. It's all about choosing the right words to convey our thoughts and feelings with precision and clarity. And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning of your vocabulary journey.
That's right. It's about continually exploring language, experimenting with new words, and finding those hidden gems that allow us to express ourselves more authentically and effectively.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one casually dropping ephemeral and ubiquitous into everyday conversations, leaving everyone in awe of your eloquence.
Huh, I wouldn't mind that, but seriously, this has been such an eye-opening experience. I'm feeling inspired to pay more attention to my language and to embrace the power of words.
That's fantastic. And remember, the journey of language exploration is a lifelong adventure. There's always something new to learn, and the possibilities for expression are endless.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive into powerful vocabulary,
Right.
I think it's important to remember that this isn't just about sounding smarter.
Absolutely, it's about so much more than that.
Right. We've talked about how the right words can help you be more persuasive in meetings,
Yes.
give feedback more delicately, even navigate those tricky group projects you mentioned.
Precisely. A richer vocabulary is like having a sharper set of tools. It allows you to express yourself with more nuance and precision, whether you're writing an email,
Right.
giving a presentation,
Right.
or just having a casual conversation.
It's like the difference between using a bull knife and a razor-sharp one.
Oh,
You can still get the job done with the dull knife, but the sharp one makes it so much easier and the results are so much cleaner.
I love that analogy. And just like with any skill building, a strong vocabulary takes practice.
Totally, but it's not about memorizing a bunch of fancy words and then awkwardly shoehorning them into every sentence.
Definitely not. It's about understanding the subtle shades of meaning, the context in which certain words are most effective,
right,
and then using them in a way that feels natural and authentic to you.
So it's not just about the quantity of words we know, it's about the quality of our understanding and how we use them.
Exactly. And that's where the real power lies.
So, dear listener, as we wrap out this deep dive,
Okay.
we want to encourage you to embrace the journey of language exploration.
Don't be afraid to pick up a dictionary, browse through a thesaurus, or even just pay close attention to the language used in books, articles, and conversations.
And remember, even incorporating just one new word from this deep dive into your regular vocabulary can make a noticeable difference.
It's like adding a new color to your palette, a new spice to your cooking, a new tool to your toolbox.
And who knows, maybe you'll inspire someone else to start paying more attention to their own language.
Exactly. And that's how we create a ripple effect, raising the level of communication and understanding for everyone.
So with that in mind, we encourage you to go out there and experiment with your newfound vocabulary. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yes.
To play with words and to discover the endless possibilities of expression.
Because the power of language is within your grasp, and the journey of learning is one that never truly ends.
That wraps up our deep dive into powerful English vocabulary. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration and that you'll continue to discover the magic and the power of word.
Until next time, happy communicating.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're looking at what it takes to be like a really advanced English speaker. Like not just, getting by, but really, you know, like, wow, you speak English so well.
Exactly.
And to help us, we have an expert.
Hello. Welcome. It's great to be here.
Now, the source material that we have today is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is.
It's a script for a podcast episode. That's a test.
Yeah.
For non-native speakers to see what level they are.
It's fascinating because I think native speakers would have trouble with this too.
Yeah. And that's why we're diving into it.
Exactly.
So, tell me a little bit about like the structure of this test.
Okay, so it's 10 multiple choice questions.
Okay.
3 possible answers for each.
Pretty standard.
Yeah, A, B, or C kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's vocabulary, idioms, grammar.
Oh.
Really subtle stuff.
Okay.
So if you get 0 to 4 correct answers, you're intermediate.
Okay.
5 to 7, you're upper intermediate. Okay. 8 to 10, you can claim that advanced level.
Okay.
Pretty impressive.
All right, so let's jump into some of these things.
Okay.
Like, what kind of vocabulary are we talking about here?
Okay, so one question asks for a synonym for the word ephemeral.
Okay.
Now, knowing that it means temporary is one thing.
Right.
But think about how a deeper understanding of the word can impact your communication. Instead of just saying something's temporary, you can evoke a sense of like fleeting beauty or the bittersweet nature of change.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's adding a whole other layer of meaning to your expression.
So it's not just about knowing what the word means,
Right.
but how to like use it
Exactly.
like a real pro.
Precisely. And that's just one example.
Okay.
The test also has idioms, which can be fairly difficult for language learners.
Yeah, those are tricky.
Yeah.
Those are those things that make perfect sense to a native speaker. But if you're learning English, it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
So one that comes to mind is burn the midnight oil,
Okay.
which means to work late into the night.
Right.
But imagine trying to figure that out.
If you'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oil. Burning oil.
Midnight.
It paints such a vivid picture, though.
It does, yeah.
It conjures these images of flickering lamplight and just like the quiet dedication to like achieve your goal.
Yeah, it's almost romantic.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, you had to have the oil lamp to burn to stay up late.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
I also think sometimes I take for granted how much cultural knowledge is just like baked into these expressions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly into one of the other questions. He uses the phrase take a rain check.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Which means to reschedule, but its origins lie in a uniquely American pastime, baseball.
It does.
Like it's so specific to that.
Yeah, it's really specific.
That if you didn't know that's where it came from, you'd have no idea.
No.
Like rain and check.
Yeah, and games postponed due to rain.
Right.
If you got a rain check, you can attend a future game.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so interesting.
It is really interesting.
That like mastering a language isn't just about memorizing words and rules, but it's about understanding like the cultural tapestry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And that cultural understanding goes hand in hand with a strong grasp of grammar.
Okay, so let's talk about grammar.
All right.
What are some of the more challenging aspects of grammar that this test throws at you?
Okay, so one question tests your knowledge of the third conditional.
The third conditional.
What is that? So those if he had known constructions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Those always like my brain do a little twist.
I know. It's like, what? But what's really interesting about them is that it allows us to explore like hypothetical situations in the past.
Oh.
And play with the idea of alternate realities.
Like, what if I'd done this?
Exactly.
What if I hadn't done this?
What if I had taken that job?
Right.
What if I hadn't missed that flight?
Yeah.
You ever find yourself pondering those what ifs?
Oh, all the time.
Right.
It's like you have a secret superpower to rewind time, to imagine those different outcomes.
And being able to express those complex thoughts grammatically is like a sign of true fluency.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop it there.
Oh, no. There's more?
It also has the future perfect tense, which is by this time next year, I will have completed.
See, now that one always trips me up.
It's tricky.
Yeah. What makes it so tricky?
So it's all about like accurately expressing actions that will be completed before a specific point in the future.
Right.
So it's like you're juggling multiple time frames in your mind, and you have to articulate that relationship clearly.
Yeah.
But when you can master it, it adds a level of sophistication and precision to your speech.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got challenging vocabulary, quirky idioms.
Yes.
Mind-bending grammar.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, it wouldn't be a true test of advanced English without some phrasal verbs and collocations.
Oh, yes. Those are fun.
Oh, they're so fun.
Those little combinations of words that can either make you sound like a native speaker.
Yep.
Or like you have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one phrasal verb that's considered advanced is put up with.
Okay.
Which means to tolerate.
Right.
It's not just the meaning that's important here, though. It's the subtle ways it's used.
Okay.
So a native speaker would instinctively know that you put up with an annoying neighbor.
Right.
But you wouldn't put up with like a delicious meal.
Right.
It just sounds weird.
Yeah, it just sounds wrong. Yeah.
And that's what makes it advanced. It's like, those little nuances.
Yeah.
And then there are collocations. These are those specific word pairings that just sound right to a native ear.
Yeah.
So we say strongly agree.
Right.
But we wouldn't say deeply happy.
Right. You would say very happy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Or something. Yeah.
And so knowing which words naturally go together is another hallmark of an advanced speaker. Like they've developed an intuitive sense of what sounds natural and fluent.
It's almost like, they're not thinking about the rules.
Exactly. It's like they just know.
It just sounds right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that these collocations often defy strict grammatical rules.
Right.
It's more about developing an ear for the language, almost like a musician would an ear for harmony.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you kind of have to just like absorb it through exterior, right? This is all so insightful.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Like it really makes you think about language on like such a deeper level.
It's not just like,
Yeah.
It's so much more.
Yeah.
But hold on. We've covered a lot already.
Yeah, we have.
Let's take a moment to gather our thoughts. We'll be right back to explore even more of these insights from this deep dive into advanced English.
Sounds good. Okay, so we're back and we are talking about, what it takes to be an advanced English speaker.
Yeah.
As we were talking before about those phrasal verbs and collocations, it really struck me that like this test wants to know that you can actually use the language, not just that you can like recognize it.
Yeah, you got it.
Like
it's not just about the definition.
Yeah.
Like take the question about scrutinize.
Okay.
Knowing that it means to examine carefully is good.
Right.
But an advanced speaker wouldn't just define it.
Right.
They would be able to just weave it seamlessly into a sentence.
Yeah.
Like the detective scrutinized the crime scene for clues.
Right.
It's about taking that word and making it your own.
It's like the difference between knowing the ingredients for a cake and actually baking it.
That's a great...
like you can have all the right elements.
Yeah.
But it's the skill to put it all together.
That's good. Yeah. And that level of mastery, I think, applies to every aspect of language, from the vocabulation, grammar, to like the idioms and collocations.
Yeah.
It's about moving beyond the textbook.
Right.
And into that realm of true fluency.
Yeah.
Where you can express yourself with confidence.
Yeah.
Clarity.
Yeah.
Even a match of like elegance.
Right.
One
of the other questions that I thought was kind of interesting was the word formation.
Okay.
It asked for the word that describes someone who writes plays. And obviously the answer is playwright.
Playwright.
But it got me thinking about like, how, like, we form words.
What's so cool about the word playwright
Yeah.
is that, like, it's not just some random collection of letters.
Right.
It's this beautiful example of how language reflects deeper, like, cultural values and historical connections.
Yeah.
So right comes from an Old English word.
Okay.
Meaning maker or builder.
It's like a playmaker.
It's literally a maker of plays.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So even in that one word, like we can find all this
history and culture.
Connections, yeah.
Like every word has a story.
It's like a story, yeah. And for those who are like truly dedicated to mastering a language, those hidden stories become more and more like apparent.
Yeah.
You know, unraveling those connections.
Yeah.
Exploring the etymology of words.
Yeah.
It adds like another layer of richness and depth.
Absolutely.
You ever find that like exploring the origins of words enhances your appreciation?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like a whole new world opens up, and suddenly, like you said, it's not just these random sounds, but they have this meaning.
They have this history.
This history and connection.
Yeah, and as you become more attuned to those nuances, you start to see those connections like everywhere. You know, prefixes, suffixes, root words, they all tell a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you become a language detective.
That's a great way to put it. It is a process of decoding.
Yeah, you're like looking for the clues.
Yes, uncovering those hidden connections.
Yeah.
And constantly like expanding your understanding of how these words work together.
Yeah. And it's not even just about the technical aspects of the language that we were talking about before, you know, with like those idioms.
Like take a rain check.
Exactly. Yeah, there's this whole other cultural dimension.
Absolutely. Language and culture are like totally linked.
Yeah.
You can't separate them.
Yeah.
To truly master a language, you need to immerse yourself in its cultural context.
Yeah.
Which means not just learning the words, but understanding like the values.
The beliefs,
the humor that those words reflect.
Yeah.
You know?
Like those little idioms are like little windows into that culture.
Like glimpses into the psyche.
History.
The history.
The shared experience.
Yes. And I'm starting to realize that mastering a language is about so much more than just being able to communicate.
Yeah, you're learning about the world.
You're expanding your horizons.
Yeah.
You're sharpening your cognitive skills.
Yeah. It's like you're learning a new way of thinking.
That's beautifully put.
You know?
I think that sense of personal growth is one of the most rewarding aspects of language learning. You know, pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Right.
Embracing that challenge of complexity.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, emerging with this richer, more nuanced understanding of the world around you.
This has been so fascinating. Like, it's really shifted my perspective on language learning.
I know. It's really cool.
It's not just about, you know, acquiring knowledge. It's this whole mindset.
It is a mindset.
Of curiosity and exploration and continuous growth.
Yeah.
But hold on, there's still more to explore.
Okay.
We'll be right back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of advanced English. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our look at what it takes to be an advanced English speaker.
It's been really interesting, right? We've really gone into, like, what sets those advanced speakers apart.
Yeah, like we've been saying, it's not just about the number of words, you know?
Right.
But, like, how deeply you understand them and how precisely you can use them.
Yeah, how you connect them.
And all that.
To the culture,
Yeah, so as we kind of, like, wrap things up here, I've been thinking, what is the point?
What is the value?
Yeah, like, why is it so important to be an advanced English speaker?
Is it just to, like, impress people?
Yeah, or is it...
Or is there something more?
Yeah, what is it?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it really gets at the heart of, like, why they learn languages in the first place.
Right.
So on a practical level, yes.
Yeah.
Advanced language skills can open doors.
Right.
You know, they can help you with your career.
Yeah, for sure.
Travel, make it easier to communicate.
Yeah, navigating the world?
Yeah, but I think the real value is something much deeper.
What is it?
So think about it this way. Language is how we understand and interact with the world.
It's how we think.
It's how we connect with others.
Yeah.
So the better we are with language, the richer our lives.
It's not just about communication, then.
No, it's about being human.
Wow.
You know?
Okay.
So with an expanded vocabulary, you can, like, see things that you might not have otherwise noticed.
Yeah, like the subtleties.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can savor a complex idea.
Yeah.
Appreciate a well-written sentence and with grammar, you know.
Yeah.
You can build an argument.
Right.
Make your point.
Express yourself.
Yes. And with an understanding of the culture.
Right.
And those idioms.
Yeah.
You can really connect with people.
Yeah, on a deeper level.
On a much deeper level.
Yeah.
So it's like Language is this key.
It unlocks that.
It unlocks new perspectives and possibilities.
Yeah, and it's been so fascinating.
It really has.
To explore this.
It is bad.
Like, it's really changed how I think about language learning.
Good.
It's not about acquiring knowledge. It's about, like...
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset, yeah.
Curiosity, exploration.
Yeah, always growing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up.
Okay.
I want to thank you for joining us and helping us to understand all of that.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
And to everyone listening.
Keep learning.
Keep learning, keep exploring.
That's right.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive. 72 minutes?